All right, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Matt Hildreth. I'm part of an organization called ruralorganizing.org, and we help pull together this panel. The panel's called Rural Does Not Equal White. And I'm really excited about the panel today because we have amazing leaders from across the country that I think can really talk about rural organizing in general, but then also within a context of a much more, I think, fuller, better understanding of what rural America actually is. I think anybody from a small town or rural community knows that there's a big white population in rural America, but I think a lot of people forget that 60% of rural Americans across the country, or 40% of rural Americans across the country are people of color or non-white. So we're going to talk about those issues today. I'm just going to play the moderator, and we'll do just real quick introductions. And I think this is going to be Q&A heavy. So we're going to want to take a lot of questions from the crowd. So think about questions that you want to ask as we're doing the quick introductions. And then we'll just go from there. But just to see a show of hands, just so we kind of know who's in the room. So who would consider themselves from a rural community or small town? Very cool. And anybody running for office or leadership positions in those communities? Very cool. And anybody that does like specifically like organizing in those communities? Very cool. All right, so we'll just go down the line here, and then we'll jump right into the Q&A. And then I think that if you ask a question, if you could do it from, is that lame to do it from the microphone? We are Facebook Living it, so it might be good for the video if folks can hear you. So I think there's a microphone here.
Can you just repeat what we say so we don't have to move?
Yeah, you know what? I will repeat back what you say. That's a better idea. See, look at that. We're going to be very group-minded in how we solve problems. Yeah, and then I mentioned before, but the hashtag that we're using is NN18. That's the hashtag for the conference, so you can just use that. And then we'll just go from there. So we'll just go down the line here.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming today. My name is Lanan Bakam. I am from Mount Pleasant, Iowa, where I was born and raised. My family came to the United States in 1980 as political refugees. We are tie-down people who were being persecuted in Southeast Asia through much of the tie-down existence, and eventually my family made it to a refugee camp in Thailand in 1979. And through the help of Governor Ray, former governor of Iowa, and working with Ambassador Ken Quinn, Ambassador to Cambodia actually, who was another Iowan, they worked to relocate the tie-down people from a refugee camp in Thailand into the United States as one group, all to Iowa, which was a really effective refugee relocation program. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here in the United States. I organized in politics for a number of years. I grew up in a small town where Tom Vilsack, former Secretary of Ag, United States Department of Agriculture, is from. And I worked in campaigns in 2000 all the way through I don't even know when I end. Just keep doing them. But I also had an opportunity to work in the Obama administration for a number of years, and finished out the time at the end of the administration working for USDA as Deputy Undersecretary for Farm and Foreign Agricultural Services, as well as USDA's Military Veterans Agriculture Liaison. I spent 8 years in the military as well.
He honey wash day na Betty wash day Madakabi Chajemi Tamaki Ali Moran and Macha Pikasto Lakota Wea Hemacha na Lakota Wakpa wash day Oyanke Hematahan. Good morning, my friends and relatives. My name is Ali Moran, and I am from the Cheyenne River Lakota Nation in South Dakota. I am running for Senate for my district, which is one of the largest districts within the state. And I do a lot of organizing on my reservation and throughout my state, just being very active in the political realm of things, because it's very important for us as Native American people to be there at the decision-making tables, because even though we are inherent citizens, the first peoples of this country, our voices are very much left out of important decisions that are being made each and every single day within our state legislators and the federal government. So that is why I'm here to bring as much information and share as much knowledge as I possibly can with you all, and I thank you all for being here.
Hello, my name is Nerea Calero and I'm a DACA recipient. I came to the States when I was 8 years old through the desert undocumented. In 2012, I'm sorry, when we got the DACA, it changed my life. So I feel like I can have a voice to represent immigrants. And I've been representing the 100 immigrants, the 100 Dreamers in Montana, and now I'm an advocate for immigrants. I'm the voice for them. And in rural areas, people feel scared because we're very little immigrants, so they don't want to speak out. So I've been doing that for them. We've been helping the families that have been separated by the recent immigration raids, and our Christian community has been helping hugely also, and I help organize Mass in Spanish for us, which we didn't have before. And I'm just here to inform you guys more about what immigrants contribute to economy in our rural areas, and I think it's a great amount that we contribute to. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Francis Johnson. I come to this space as a pastor for more than 22 years, a civil rights lawyer who's focused on constitutional torts, including voting rights litigation, as president of the Georgia NAACP, having just wrapped up about 10 lawsuits aimed at making sure that the ballot is unfettered in Georgia. I also come to this space as the Democratic nominee for Georgia's 12th congressional district. Is centered in Augusta, Georgia, which is the hometown of James Brown, the hardest working man in show business. And I think I'm one of the hardest working candidates in this midterm election. It is one of the most gerrymandered districts. It is gone from a Democratic leaning district to a Republican leaning district by 17 percentage points. By the legislature, who has redrawn the district 3 times in the last 10 years. So we intend to demonstrate that there is a power that is greater than partisan politics that undermines our democracy, and that's the power of putting people first. In the primary, we were able to experiment with that. It's the same experiment that Stacey Abrams is engaged in. She's a dear friend of mine, and our campaigns are as coordinated as can be, to see if we put people first before party and president, that we can organize across states like Georgia and win. I deeply believe that when we fight, we win, and our primary result demonstrated that. We won 240 of 243 precincts, and every one of the 19 counties in my congressional district, including counties that were more than 60% white. We moved them to the Democratic column. And I think that's because you lead with values. We'll talk about that a little bit further as we get into the panel, but I think that's what's key and what's important. That's what other candidates who have been successful have done, and that's what we're doing in rural Georgia.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask a few of the first questions just to get us started, and then we'll go to the crowd. So, and I'm just we'll do popcorn style or whatever. So I'm just going to ask a question, and whoever feels moved to answer, go ahead and answer it. But my first question is what is the biggest difference that you see between organizing in more of like an urban or suburban context and a rural context? So I don't know. I know some people have moved into rural communities from bigger cities on this panel, so I might suggest if you want to take that first one, but then maybe others could jump in.
So I grew up in Las Vegas, big city, and I think doing this in a rural area is, for me, it's more motivating because there's less people wanting to go out there and fight for the immigrants. In Las Vegas, there's more people wanting to do this work. So I feel like I have more of a responsibility doing this in this rural space. Also, it's like we are a huge family, and I almost know all the immigrants that live in Montana, and it's strange, but it is. So I think it brings me. It's like I'm fighting for my family. You know, when you live in these places, you get more connected and more motivated to do these things. Where in Las Vegas, there's just too many people to, you know. I know I would care for everybody, but this is like my family that I'm fighting for.
So in Iowa, there's obviously a lot of politics that happen. It's a big focus of the country for a period of time. There are a lot of minorities who live in the state, and as a percentage, they're not huge, but they exist. And they are often key voting blocks who can be, I think, generally counted on to vote Democratic. But the challenge is making sure that they turn out. And when you're a minority population, I think you often feel, especially in today's political climate, that you're being attacked. And what happens when you're attacked? You circle your wagons and you close your doors and you kind of just protect yourselves. And it's difficult, I think, at times to let new folks in. You might be suspicious of them. But that being said, the effort still needs to be made to reach out to these communities and to show them, hey, we care. We might not be from your background, but we empathize. We know that it's important to elevate this issue, and we want to help. How can we help you turn your people out to vote? Because it's that important. And for me personally, my parents who are political refugees, my mom who speaks very little English, knows that she absolutely hates Trump because she watches news from Thailand. And apparently they don't like him over there either. But she gets it, right? She knows. And for someone who you wouldn't think, would be politically advised, she is. And it's impressive to me. And there are a heck of a lot of people out there who are. And so all they need is a nudge and some knowledge to know where to go vote. And for my parents, I tell them, hey, primary day is coming up here. This is your polling location. Make sure you guys go. And they don't just go by themselves. Like Narita said, this is a big family. They take their friends too, and our relatives and our cousins. And just by telling 2 people, we get 10 votes, right? So just making the effort and doing the outreach is key.
I would lift up a couple of points about organizing in rural context. First, you've got to remember what Fannie Lou Hamer said when you're organizing, that 3 are better than none. And I lift that because sometimes if you just focus on quantitative methods of measuring your success, then you miss a great deal about what it means to be in the rural context. So I would urge folks to consider a mixed method approach to the organizing using both quantitative data and qualitative data. We know in our district that those kinds of data are not going to bubble up to the prognosticators and forecasters of this midterm. They don't know the district, but we do, and we know how to organize it. And we first start by deconstructing those numbers and really showing what it really means. For example, white men hold 4 times the power of women and people of color, even though they only make up 31% of the population. So let's redefine who's the minority when it comes to the district. And when you think about the seats in Congress, it's even worse. 65% of those seats are held by white men. They only make up 31% of the population. When you begin to lead with values that are rooted in the qualitative side of that, then you can appeal to women in terms of the issues that aren't being addressed. You can appeal to people of color, and then specifically to the various communities of people of color. So in my district, African Americans make up 36%, Latinos make up 7%. So working within the context of leveraging undocumented parents to encourage their American citizen children to participate is critical. But knowing the context is important. And then when you add other people of color, then you get up to about 46%. You get up to the area where you can build a coalition. You can't do that if you just are going to depend on quantitative data to tell you what's possible. It is possible, but you've got to dig in and really get into the grassroots and organize around the qualitative things that you know about your community.
So, organizing on the reservation to get out to vote. From when I first started back in 2015 and 2016, I first noticed it was very hard for me to help motivate my people to actually care enough to get to the polls. And that's because of the long ongoing history of colonization and genocide with the US government. And so I had to sit down and think of, okay, I respect and I love my people so much, and I know what we went through, I know our stories, I know our history, the correct history, because that's something that they don't teach in the K through 12 westernized history books. They don't tell you that the United States government came directly to our campgrounds and massacred a majority of our people. They tell you that Custer saved the Indians. They tell you that, you know, Abraham Lincoln was a good guy for all Native Americans, but that's not true. And so knowing that, I started with the youth and talking to our youth about, you know, this is our history, and this is something that is a part of our people, and this is what makes us so resilient, so strong, and we have to take that and move forward with it. And we can't afford not to have a seat at the table, to have a voice at the table. And so we know our history, we know the true history, but we have to take that and we have to take that disregard for the United States government, and we have to just push hard to, I guess, literally live in two worlds, because you're still holding on to your cultural values and who you are as a tribal nation, but knowing the importance of having that voice and that seat at the table. So I had to put those two and two together, and more of the youth were kind of coming to a realization that, you know, if we don't register to vote and if we don't vote, then the majority of the people who discriminate against people of color, especially against Native American people, are going to be put into office, which is majority. South Dakota is a red state, it's a Republican state, and their first interest is not helping all peoples, and that's been made very clear. So it was hard to organize there at first, but once you came from that whole historical and educational background and putting it into perspective as to this is why it's important for us to be there at the table, because if we are not there at the table and making decisions, then no one's going to make the right decision for us, because each and every single day, like I said earlier, at the state level and the federal level, big decisions are made for our people without our people. So I guess that's a little bit of the experience that I have with organizing.
Hey, I'll jump on that real quick, Allie. So when the tie-down people came to the United States, there was a federal policy in the State Department that refugees were dispersed around the country. So if you were from a specific ethnic group, you would be split up and shipped around the country. Well, because the tie-down people, with a coalition of their leadership, advocated for the relocation of the tie-down people as a group, that allowed our people to come to the United States as a unit rather than the traditional method of disbursement. And it was made possible because we talked to the ambassador, the former governor of Iowa, and folks at the State Department to give them a reason why. And Governor Ray talked to President Ford, who worked with the State Department, and they changed the policy, right? So that Iowa then created a refugee relocation office, and made that movement of the tie-down people possible. So 95% of all tie-down people who live in the United States live in Iowa. I don't think people would realize that. I'd say you would probably be on one of the coasts, right? But that being said, if we have a voice and a seat at the table, then we can advocate for the things that we need as a community. And that's really important. So for folks who are organizing, you know, keep in mind, let's bring these people in. Let's see what they have to say, and let's see how we can help them.
Great. Well, my last question before we go to audience Q&A is, you know, organizing in rural communities is not always pleasant. I mean, we don't want to paint this with rose-colored glasses or whatever, but just in the last couple of days we've been talking about stories, and I wonder if anybody has a story that just sort of demonstrates what's it like to organize in rural communities, either the negative aspects of it or stories. You guys shared some really interesting stories of sort of people surprising you, so I don't know if you have any of those stories, but I enjoyed hearing them last night and would be curious to hear them again.
Well, yeah, since I'm an EMT and I work in the cardiorespiratory unit, so I've been working with patients for a couple of years, and we had a rally here last month, which we organized 5 days before. We got over 600 people at the county jail where they're holding a lot of the men that were raided by immigration. So when I was done with my speech, I got pulled away to go give an interview, and around the corner, I found this man crying. He was in tears, and he says, "You helped my wife when she was getting the cancer treatment, and I'm here for you." He was just crying, and I bet this man told other people, you know, and they're informing them of what's going on. And this is what happens in rural communities. One tells 10. And so yeah, that was a great surprise for me there. I've been stopped at the store and they told me, "Hey, you've been part of my care, you've been part of my relatives' care, and we thank you because you were good to us, and we're here to support you." I've had doctors, nurses, everybody, you know, that know my story, that work close to me. It's funny because people tell you, "Oh wow, you're a dreamer. I finally met one in person." It's like, wow, yeah, we're real. But yes, I mean, we've had a lot of information forums, know your rights forums, where people come, and we always encourage them to bring this to your table, right? Inform other people. I've also had patients say, well, as soon as your work permit expires, you get to go back to Mexico, because not just because you want to be here, you get to stay. I've cried a couple times when I've been called a terrorist by patients that I'm giving care to. I think about 85% of them, once I tell them what's really going on, what immigrants go through, what immigrants do give the economy, they're like, wow, we didn't know this was real. You know, it's Montana, Fox News, programmed in their head. You know, I think that once they look at me and they don't know my story, they picture me with a backpack full of drugs and a knife in my hand, right? Because that's what they tell us we are, criminals. And they don't know it's just a misdemeanor, right? It's illegal crossing. I don't like to call it illegal because no human is illegal. But yeah, these are the good and bad experiences. This man that said that I didn't get to stay, he was going through cancer treatment. I cannot say more information about him because HIPAA. But yes, I hope that man is doing better now, and I hope he has PTSD from war. And I get it, right? They're not informed enough. And this is what we like to do, inform people so that they can know what the truth is. My son has been told in school that he should go back to Mexico just for being bilingual. My sister's son was asked if his parents were drug dealers because they're Mexican. And they bring this from home. But what we're trying to do is inform their parents so that their kids won't be harmed by these thoughts. So yeah, it's good and bad, but I've had mostly good experiences than bad.
I would just, say that organizing in Georgia is sort of watching history repeat itself. So we're organizing in places where black people have had power and have built great institutions and controlled great vast parts of our state, only to see those gains eviscerated. In Southeast Georgia, for example, African Americans after the Civil War built banks, savings and loan institutions, colleges and universities, and were elected to state government, every position of government besides governor of the state. As a matter of fact, the first African American to speak in the House of Representatives was from Georgia, from Macon, Georgia. He was a tailor who bought his own freedom prior to the commencement of the Civil War. And all of that power was eviscerated through Jim Crow laws. And literally we're seeing the accumulation of power amongst people of color after the second Reconstruction of this country, which some people call the Civil Rights Movement, being eviscerated again through a new set of laws that are different in terms of what they're getting at. Is no longer grandfather test and counting the bubbles in the bar of soap or the number of jelly beans in a jar or being able to perfectly recite the Constitution. We see new challenges. So we see barriers that are lowered as a part of movement efforts, and then we see new barriers that are erected. For example, the person who is running against Stacey for governor is our Secretary of State, who has used every means possible to narrow the vote in Georgia, literally purging 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 people from the rolls at a time. And we have had to go to court and sue to get those persons put back on the rolls. But that's what we're facing. We're facing the elimination of polling places and the relocation of the one polling place that will remain to the sheriff's department. We're seeing a rise of hate groups and racialized violence. I had, in organizing in one community, just brazen posting that it's time to kill this nigga and make him famous. And with my picture, death threats at the house, phone calls, it is as if we are reliving chapters that we thought were distant memory, but they're not. And so I might offer this as well. Despite that climate, there is opportunity to build and work, because this is a part of Georgia that has been forgotten, like many places in your states, by Republican and Democrat, where they've had double-digit unemployment in my district through the booms of the 90s and the 2000s, and although the president claims this is the best economy ever, they don't feel it in Southeast Georgia. The stores are boarded up, towns are dwindling in terms of population. This is an excellent moment to organize around a new set of values that put people first, that are not playbook politics from Republican or Democrat playbooks, but really seek to lift up the voices of neighbors. And so we just simply adopted a whole new language. And this really came to us as we were experimenting with the Moral Monday organizing architecture that William Barber advanced in North Carolina. I was president of the Georgia NAACP, and so we took a page from William Barber, and he helped us to really launch the Moral Monday Coalition. But we're seeing that people, once you peel back, the layer, the label, want the same things. We want our hospitals to not close, because the whole community suffers when we don't have a hospital. And so Medicaid expansion is not a Democrat or Republican thing, it's a people first thing, because people need access to emergency care. When we frame it like that, stop calling our citizens constituents, but call them neighbors. That's who they are. They are our neighbors. Adopt a new language that is divorced from the context of the past, and really focus on where people are, I think there's a possibility for the South to rise, but it won't be the old South rising. Although there are forces that seek to make that happen, it will be a new South that is diverse, that is strong, that is vibrant, because diversity has become our strength and not a tool of division.
Yeah. Just touching back on some of the hardships of organizing on my reservation in rural South Dakota. So just, you had to do a lot of, like I said earlier, education and breaking it down even further to the fact that the whole voting system and the whole westernized governmental system is a very foreign concept. It's a foreign paradigm to my people. It always has been. We initially, before the colonizers came, we had our own way of governing. And it was through our own kinship system. And our whole, the way that we even set up our teepees was the way that we governed our people. And how it was set up was our elders' teepees were set up in the middle, and then the rest of the families were set up around the elders, because the elders are wise. They hold the wisdom. So they were in the middle. They completed our hochokan, the way of life, the circle. And so the rest of the teepees were set out around them. And then we had our scouts set out around the whole encampment. And that was, I don't know what that was, but but that was, in a sense, our system, the way that we protected the people and just governed ourselves. And so taking that and looking at how that was a foreign concept, and then jumping into colonization and the boarding school system, which there's this quote that was drilled into my ancestors, and it was "kill the Indian, save the man." And that's what the boarding school system was meant to do. It was meant to kill the Indian and save the man. So coming from that hard history, that's why a lot of my people, my ancestors, don't want to get involved with voting. I don't know what that is either. Must be outside.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. But just coming from those hard histories, that's why it's somewhat hard to have our elders in particular turn out to vote. But it's just going back to acknowledging that and moving forward. And so one thing that I'm really thankful for, a really strong concept that has been brought forward from generations past, which is the seventh generation mindset. And that's something that, living today, but you're thinking 7 generations ahead. How are the decisions that you're making today, how's the work that you're doing today going to impact 7 generations from now? That's how my ancestors thought. That's why I am sitting here today at this table speaking in front of you, because my ancestors were very strong. They were very strategic. And most importantly, they were very humble and caring and giving people. That's why we fed the colonizers when they first came, because we are so giving.